security gives me the opportunity, first of all, to start off by telling you my favorite joke. And you also see it's relevant. It's about one of the earlier elections a few election cycles ago. During the transition, the outgoing prime minister is still there. The new guy is about to come in a few days. And the story is that some guy comes up to the prime minister's residence, Jerusalem, knocks on the front door, says, "Hi, I'd like to speak to the prime minister, please." The prime minister's wife answers it. Well, she answers. She said, "Well, you know, he's not really prime minister anymore. We're in the transition. In any event, he's not home." "Thank you very much." Walks away. 15 minutes later, knocks on the door. "Hi, I'd like to see the prime minister, please." He said, "I told you before, he's not really prime minister anymore. And in any event, he's not home." "Thank you very much." 15 minutes later, the same Gundli comes and knocks on the door. "Hi, I'd like to see the prime minister, please." He says, "Tell me, what are you, stupid? Are you dead? Don't you understand? He's not the prime minister anymore." He says, "I understand. It's just so good to hear it." No names. This is a nonpartisan meeting. I do have the feeling that some people in the United States might want to localize it. There's this white building in Washington, but each according to their own. I'd like to... Different punchline? These jokes have a way of getting around. I want to start off by doing something which may have never been done before in the annals of Israeli national security discourse. It is so rare, so unusual. It is optimistic. It is positive. And I've always thought that optimism almost borders on being anti-Semitic. So I'm going to actually start off by saying something positive and optimistic. And that is at age 70. Israel celebrated its 70th anniversary, which still is this year. We've never been more secure, more military strong than we are today. And first of all, Israel exists. And after 70 years, who thought that we would be around after 70 years? That was not a foregone conclusion in the early decades, far from it. So a huge success. We are today an established, prosperous, and I would argue, a fundamentally secure state. That doesn't mean that there aren't lots of threats out there. I'll talk about them in a minute. There are. But we've won our existence. Israel is here to stay. There are no existential threats today. There haven't been for quite a while. I would argue that unless Iran goes nuclear, there will not be, and even then we can handle it. There are no, and have not been for many years, significant military-to-military, conventional military threats. The Arab armies are either in a state of total disarray, at peace with Israel, or no longer interested in fighting a war with us. The non-conventional threats, well, the Syrian chemical arsenal has been largely, not completely dismantled under international pressure. We always knew they'd hide some of it. And the Iranian nuclear program has been postponed. Don't know for how long, but postponed for the meantime. Ben-Gurion famously said that if and when Israel had a Jewish population of 5 million, a totally unimaginable number back in the 50s, unimaginable, its existence would be secured. Well, we're at 7 million now. Jews have a hard time accepting good news. We have a long national history. The groans, 2,000 years of Jewish insecurity and persecution, culminating in the Holocaust. So there's good reason for our reluctance to accept good news. But I would argue that it is very much there. And we should embrace that part of the picture as well. Israel's strategic environment has been transformed, much, not entirely, for the better. We are surrounded today by failed states, the Arab states, or states in crisis. The biggest problem that the Arab states today isn't their strength, it's their weakness. It's the fact that they've come apart or are coming apart. And that the Arab Spring isn't over, it's barely begun. It's going to be with us for decades. Because all of the causes that gave rise to the Arab Spring or the Arab Winter in 2011 are there today. Most of the Arab countries have given up on any practical aspiration of destroying Israel. As I said, The armies are either at peace or in disarray or not interested in fighting. Egypt and Jordan made peace. The Gulf states would like to establish relations with us. As a matter of fact, there are increasingly extensive relations under the table. It used to be contingent on an agreement with the Palestinians, at least major progress with them. It is largely not. They probably can't go to formal relations, but below the surface. Last year, MBS Mohammed bin Sultan, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, comes out with a truly remarkable statement. Now, the man has lost a little bit of popularity since then, just a little. He comes out and recognizes Israel's right to live in the Middle East as a Jewish state. Wow, that's almost a Sadat-like moment, which we have not given enough attention to. The Syrian and Iraqi armies have been the primary threat that the IDF was built to face in recent decades, have been decimated by their civil wars. With the exception of Iran, big exception, come back to it in a minute, with the exception of Iran, the interstate stage of the conflict seems to be over, and the conflict today is Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, two non-state actors. There's no hostile superpower today. Russia's a friendly country. The relationship is problematic, for sure. But it's a fundamentally friendly country towards Israel. Israel has relations today with more countries than ever before in its history, not just diplomatic, but in many cases very good military relations, of course economic relations, ties with countries in South America, with countries in Africa, the Sunni states. Above all, of course, we have a truly unique and remarkable relationship with the United States. As I said, no existential threats. I believe that we can handle a nuclear Iran if, God forbid, that ever happens. We have to make sure it doesn't. Now for the bad news. So all of you who are feeling uncomfortable with this wealth of good news, I can make you feel better. The Iranians, Hezbollah and Hamas, have correctly identified Israel's home front as its weak point, its Achilles heel. They, unlike the Arab states in the early decades, have come to the correct conclusion that they cannot defeat Israel in 1 or 2 rounds, and so they have adopted a long-term strategy. It may take decades, but they've got Allah on their side, and if it takes decades, that's fine, they're in no hurry. It's what I call a strategy of attrition until destruction. Ongoing attrition, to wear Israel down through repeated conflicts, to undermine, by attacking the Israeli home front, to undermine the resolve, the steadfastness, the staying power of Israeli society. At the same time, the Iranians have not foregone their nuclear aspirations. Hezbollah is a non-state actor with state-like capabilities. Somewhere on the order of magnitude of 130,000 rockets. This is an unimaginable number of rockets. This capability provided by Iran will for the first time provide an Arab actor with the ability to potentially severely, but to disrupt Israel's military preparations and offensive operations. For example, they will presumably target mobilization centers, storehouses. They can hit air bases and disrupt the primary focus of Israeli offensive capabilities. They can hit communications nodes, other forms of civil infrastructure, power plants, electric, water stations, etc. They can hit command and control centers. They can hit the Prime Minister's office. They can hit the Kiryat, Israel's Pentagon, the Defense Ministry, with the potential for unprecedented destruction to Israel's home front, a level that we have never experienced. I believe that Iran is the most sophisticated and therefore most dangerous adversary we have ever faced. They may be Michiganers, but they're not crazy. Okay, they know what they're doing. They've got a long-term strategy. They are very carefully calculating They are a rational actor within their extreme ideology. The supreme leader announced a 9-point strategy for Israel's destruction a few years ago. They could still go nuclear. And if that happens, of course, it is a, at least potentially existential scenario. And if Iran goes nuclear, the presumption is that a number of Arab states will, or Sunni states, probably Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey in that order. This is something which will take 10, 20, 30 years from the day that Iran goes nuclear, but time goes quickly, especially when you're having fun. I think Iran may be the first adversary that is too big, too powerful, and too far for Israel to be able to defeat. Now, we can handle them. We can defend ourselves. I'm not worried. I sleep quite well. But I don't think, I don't know that we have the capability of defeating them. Just too far and too big. Hamas is a threat. It's a contained threat. It's a much lower order of magnitude. There's ongoing terrorism, and there's the cyber threat, which has emerged in recent years, which could also create a whole new level of destruction if it actually happens in a big way. I would argue that two of the greatest threats that Israel faces today are not military. One is demography. If you take the combined population of Israel and the West Bank, just Israel and the West Bank, without Gaza, 40% of the population isn't Jewish. Israeli Arabs, Palestinian Arabs in the West Bank, 40% of the combined population. The good news, all Israeli Arabs, yeah, in the Negev, in the north, the Galilee. The good news is that the ratio remains almost constant out to 2060, which is as far as the projections go today. The bad news is it's 60-40. I'll come back to that. There is no status quo. Those who believe that the current status quo is good, we can live with the situation, there is no status quo. The number of settlers is slowly growing, slowly outside of the blocks. Outside of the blocks, yeah, in the blocks, not slowly, but that's okay, because those are areas that everybody recognizes will remain part of Israel, the final settlement, the Palestinians as well. Outside the blocks, it's only a couple of thousand a year, but a couple of thousand a year over decades, the numbers multiply. The land available for potential land swaps is being used, nature abhors a vacuum, is being used for other purposes. We are approaching a point of no return for a two-state solution. Now, I don't know exactly what a point of no return is, how you identify it. We're approaching it. A year, 2, 5, we're getting there. There's the issue of international delegitimization of Israel. I said before, on the one hand, diplomatic and military and commercial relations with more countries than ever in Israel's history. That's the good news. The bad news is that Israel's international image in international public opinion, not to put too fine a mark on it, is simply catastrophic. Not too many countries around more unpopular than Israel. What really worries me is that it's bad enough that we lost European public opinion, which I don't think we should have allowed ourselves to do, but there are now inroads in the United States as well, and there's been a dramatic downturn on the American left, on the Democratic left. Overall American support for Israel remains pretty much the same, because there's been an increase on the right, but Israel's, one of the sources of the strength of the U.S.-Israeli relationship was its bipartisan character. And this is something that both Israel bears responsibility for, and I believe that the Jewish community bears responsibility. We have generations of voters in the United States now who have grown up on a totally different narrative. And these are people who vote already, and they are, as the years go by, beginning to come into positions of influence. We have a couple of them in Congress now for the first time, and it's going to get worse. The utility of force has diminished for Israel. Now, no mistakes. Of force, military force. Let there be no mistakes. Military force is still the fundamental basis of Israel's existence. Without it, we'd be gone. But the utility of force has diminished. We've been beating the Palestinians for 100 years, we can keep doing it. Can't solve the Palestinian problem. You cannot defeat Palestinian nationalism militarily. We can and may have to act militarily to prevent Iran from going nuclear. We can't prevent it. We can postpone it at best, and probably not for very long. We don't have a military solution to the Iranian attempt to set up base, to turn Syria into forward base operations against Israel, to create a united front with Lebanon, with Hezbollah. So far, we've been quite successful in doing so, but there's a law of diminishing returns here. Okay, so we've prevented it so far, or we've prevented most of it. So I'm making up a figure. For every 10 attempts on their part to transfer weapons in, we destroy 9, but 1 gets in. And they keep doing it. And I don't see, I hope I'm wrong, I don't see Iran giving up on the objective of doing this. So I don't see a military solution to it. So there's no military solution to any of the major threats we face. To make things even more joyous, there's probably not a political solution, or may not. Now, the nature of warfare has changed. This is a problem that not only Israel faces. The United States, a global superpower, couldn't defeat a few thousand insurgents in Afghanistan. Can't defeat them in Afghanistan. Well, it's not that the U.S. couldn't do it or that Israel can't defeat Hezbollah and Hamas. We can. It's just not worth the price. The number of guys you're going to lose in an operation is so much greater than the damage that they cause that this is not a political statement, a partisan statement. I simply cannot fathom what the Israeli right is talking about. We're going to lose hundreds of guys in order to save the 1 or 2 that we lose a year? I don't see the point to it. We've been, all of our wars, all of Israel's wars, the conventional wars, we never achieved decisive victory, unconditional surrender. It was always a matter of playing for time. Each victory brought us another few, 5, 7 years of quiet. We can do that now. Pretty good. The bottom line from my point of view is, again, Israel has never been stronger, more militarily secure, and therefore more capable of making some of the fundamental decisions it faces as a country, of charting its national course from a position of strength, while the Arabs have never been weaker. I think we have a window of opportunity for another few years. The Middle East is already turning in rather bad direction. So let me tell you just a few of the policy recommendations in the book. Interestingly, maybe I should have said this in the beginning, Israel has a few national security problems. It's had them over the years, just a few. Israel has never formulated a formal national security strategy. Ben-Gurion partly did it in the early years. Dan Merido, former minister, did it in classified fashion once in 2006. He led a really comprehensive study. Those are the only exceptions, partial exceptions to what I'm saying. The reason I wrote this book was to set out for the first time, and it's a proposal for an Israeli national security strategy as a basis for discussion and an argument. And I don't think I have all the wisdom, and there are lots of legitimate approaches, but now there's a written basis for people who want to engage in fact-based discourse. That's a rare commodity nowadays, not just in the United States. I think the most important recommendation in the book, an entirely unoriginal one, was that we either have to reach a breakthrough with the Palestinians in the next few years, literally a few years, and reach a peace agreement. I think that the two-state solution is the only realistic option. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's the only realistic option. And if we can't do that, then Israel has to begin taking measures to separate unilaterally from the Palestinians. And I would say, literally in the next few years, the first half of the next president's term, whether it's Mr. Trump or someone else. That's, I think, the maximum timetable that we can allow the current situation to continue. Now, let me also say, make no mistake, I don't think I'm a starry-eyed peacenik. I think a Palestinian state will be another failed, corrupt Arab dictatorship. It will be an irredemptive state. there will not be a wonderful kumbaya peace with them. I think there will be some level of ongoing hostilities even after peace. I hope it won't be a catastrophe. If it's going to be a catastrophe, then we shouldn't do it. But I believe that there is nothing more important, other than our existence, and I'm willing to pay a price for this, nothing more important than maintaining Israel's Jewish and democratic character. And if that's the case, we have to find a way to separate from them, even though it's not going to be a wonderful peace. And when I say taking unilateral measures, it means, first of all, we stop any settlement outside of the blocks. It means we begin providing voluntary inducements to those settlers who wish to return to Israel proper to do so, and you would be amazed, I'm privy to some inside information, at the number, including the hardcore community, who would love to do so if offered the financial inducement to do so. I mean, they can't afford to get up and leave their homes. Given compensation, you would be surprised at the I think it's a majority among the non-hardcore, and it's a substantial minority even among the hardcore. I mean, the real hardcore. But actually would like to move back into Israel instead. That you would be surprised how many of the settlers, including the real hardcore, would just love to be offered financial compensation and would move back into Israel happily.
Out of the area
into Israel, from the West Bank into Israel.
Is there data for that?
All of them. All of them. There are cities.
There's the whole desert, the Golan.
Forget the Golan. I'm not talking about the Golan. The West Bank.
So I'm saying there's plenty of space.
There's plenty of space in Israel. So let me take questions afterwards. Let me take all the questions afterwards. If we start opening it up, knowing our national tendencies, may decay into a free-for-all. As a matter of fact, I say almost definitely. And I will be done in about 10 minutes. So the first recommendation is that. And as I said, I think we're approaching the point of no return. Before I say the second one, let me preface it by saying that last year I wrote an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post and announced with great fanfare the establishment of a new school of international thought. Some of you may be familiar with the realist school, the liberal school of international thought. I call this the Dayenu school of international thought. And the idea is to go back to what I think was the hallmarks of the Zionist movement, which was to make do with that which is realistically achievable. The Palestinians have always gone for all or nothing, they've ended up with nothing. The Zionist movement had the wisdom to accept what we could get, hope it would be better, hope we could improve things in the future, and we did. Compare the partition to Peel, compare Israel to partition, compare to where we are today. But we have to go back to that, because in recent decades we've moved away from it. And the first Dayenu approach, because I said that we are a fundamentally secure state today, is a change of mindset. It's to adopt a strategy of strategic patience, restraint, defense, deterrence, and diplomacy. Now, not as if we don't exercise great restraint today in the face of ongoing provocations, but I would argue we can do even more. We can take a deep breath. We are not fighting for our existence anymore. What has happened in the last 3/4 of a year in Gaza is very unpleasant. If you live around the Gaza area, it's very unpleasant. Not a single person was scratched or let alone killed by the kites and the balloons. Not a single person.
Would you want your
There was
kids
minimal
raised
property
in that?
damage. It wasn't a big deal. A few fields were burned. They were plowed under. Believe me, the total cost was about 10 minutes of the cost of finding.
And all the trees.
A few trees were burned.
Just a few.
A few trees, yes. A few trees, and that's why we have J&F who plants in the woods. It is infinitely better and cheaper I'm willing to lose lots of trees before I'm willing to have one guy scratched in a military operation. Okay? So we have to adopt a long-term strategy of an established state. So first of all, patience. We're here for the strategic patience. We're here for the long haul. Secondly, more emphasis on defense. Now, when I say defense, Israel's already got a partial rocket shield, Iron Dome, David Sling. There's another new name Israeli coming. We've got a partial rocket shield. This stuff is extraordinarily expensive. To go from what we have today to what I advocate is another small $5 to $7 billion of Israeli money, in addition to the $5 billion that the U.S. has budgeted in the new 10-year aid package, $500 million a year for 10 years for rocket defense. So that's $5 billion and another $5 to $7 billion. Now, that's big money for Israel, $5 to $7 billion. But since the threat today is the threat to the home front, it's the rocket threat, that's the primary threat we face today. If we can largely, we can never do things completely in military affairs, but largely neutralize this threat for $5 to $7 billion, it's a multi-year expenditure, we can do it. And if we have to impose an Iron Dome tax, it'll be the first tax that the people of Israel, I think, will pay happily. That's one thing. Deterrence, of course, and diplomacy. I said I don't think we really have good military solutions to any of the major challenges. When we do, I'm for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a bleeding heart. Okay? Military operations have an important role in any national security strategy, certainly in Israel's case. I don't think we have those offensive solutions yet. So more emphasis on diplomacy. And just to give you a couple of the points, first of all, the U.S. is at the center.
U.S. is what, please?
At the center of this greater emphasis on diplomacy, and I'll come back to the United States in a minute. Because it is, short of Israel's existence having anything more important than Israel's relationship with the United States, the two are closely connected. It means a dynamic...
Administration concept.
Excuse me?
That's a one administration concept.
No, it's always true. It means a dynamic peace policy, meaning that Israel should position itself in such a way that it is always perceived by the international community to be the side trying to reach a peace agreement. And what's happened in recent decades is, rightly or wrongly, Israel has come to be perceived as the obstacle. And the Palestinians are the side that wants peace. Well, no, it's not just the media, it's also because of our policies. And policies which half the people of Israel do not support, you cannot expect the international community to support.
And it's anti-Semitism, isn't it?
No,
No,
there's some of it, but it's mostly a disagreement with the policy. We have to leverage the policy with the change with the Sunni states, the Saudis and the others. Develop the good relations we have with a whole variety of countries, the Russians, India, Germany, France, Britain, Canada, Australia. There are a whole variety of countries out there that we can work with more, especially if we did what I said a minute ago, and that is adopt this dynamic peace policy. All of our problems with the international community disappear if we adopt a more flexible policy on the peace process. We have to, it means trying to reach a peace agreement with the Palestinians, making it clear that Israel is willing to withdraw from most of the West Bank, not settling outside of the bloc, going back to some open, explicit support by the Israeli government in favor of a two-state solution, which was the policy of previous governments. Wait, okay, let me finish.